The shelf insert was heavier than I expected. That is the thing I keep coming back to, even now. The shelf insert. Just a plain white melamine panel, the kind you find in every rental apartment in every city. The kind that slides in and out of closets, without anyone giving it a second thought. It was heavier than I expected when I pulled it out, and I almost dropped it, and I had to set it against the wall at an angle while I caught my balance. And that is the reason I found it. If the insert had been lighter, I would have cleaned behind it in one motion and slid it back and never known anything. Instead, I set it against the wall. I steadied myself. I looked into the back of the closet shelf, and there it was, small, black. The kind of notebook that costs $4 at any pharmacy. The kind with the slightly elastic band around it that always loses its tension after the first week. Pushed all the way to the back, against the wall, in that specific dark strip of space that the insert had been covering. The kind of place things end up when they fall, or when they are put. I picked it up. I turned it over. Nothing on the back. I opened it to the first page. A name, written in the top right corner in blue ink, small and neat. The way someone signs something they consider theirs. One name. First name only. Maya. I should have closed it there. I know that. I should have closed it, noted it as property left behind by the previous tenant, and either put it with the mail I had been collecting for her, or handed it to the building manager. That is the correct thing. That is what a person does with someone else's private notebook. I turned to the second page. The first entry was dated 14 months ago. It was about the apartment, moving in, the boxes, the particular quality of light in the bedroom in the afternoon, how she had already decided she liked it here. It was the way anyone writes when they are new somewhere, and feeling the specific, mild optimism of a fresh start. The handwriting was clear and unhurried. The tone was settled. She had oat milk in the fridge, and a friend called Danny coming over on Saturday, and a work thing on Monday she was trying not to think about. I kept reading. I was standing in the closet with the shelf insert leaning against the wall beside me, and the overhead light on, and I kept reading, and I cannot tell you exactly when the ordinary good feeling of those early entries started to shift, because it did not shift at once. It shifted the way water gets cold when you have been sitting in a bath too long, gradually, and then you notice it, and you realize it has been happening for a while. I got to the last entry. I stood there in the closet, and I read it twice. Then I closed the notebook, and I sat down on the edge of the bed, and I looked at the floor for a while. The last entry is dated 3 days before Maya gave notice on this apartment and left. It ends mid-sentence. Not at the bottom of a page, not at a natural pause, in the middle of a paragraph, in the middle of a thought, with a pen mark that drags across the page from the last word to the right-hand margin, as if the pen was put down very quickly, or knocked, or simply stopped. The last complete sentence Maya wrote, the last thing she finished before the pen dragged, was this. He was here again today. He knows I've been talking to someone. I can see it in the way he looks at me now, and I don't think I imagined it this time. I'm going to... And then the line drags. And then the page is blank, and then all the remaining pages are blank, and then the notebook ends. She left 3 days later. She left the notebook behind the shelf insert in the closet. She left a forwarding address with no one. She left her friend Danny thinking she had moved for a job. She left. The building manager told me, the day I picked up her accumulated mail, that she had been a good tenant. Quiet, no trouble. Left because of a job opportunity in another city. He said it the way you say something that is simply true, the way you say the weather or the rent amount. I am sitting in her apartment. I have her notebook. I am trying very hard to believe in the job opportunity. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. 3 weeks before I found the notebook, I signed a 12-month lease on this apartment because I had been looking for a place for 2 months, and this one came available on a Thursday, and I said yes by Friday and moved in by the following Monday. I am not impulsive. I want to be clear about that. I am someone who makes lists, who reads the terms of things, who keeps a spreadsheet when I am apartment hunting. But I had been in a sublet that was ending. I had looked at 11 apartments in 2 months, and this one was available and under my budget, and I could get the keys by Monday. Sometimes the math just lands a certain way and you say yes. The discount helped. First month at a reduced rate because, the building manager explained, the previous tenant had left with less than the standard notice period. and the apartment had not been fully turned over yet. He had a painter coming the following week. There were a few things still to address. He hoped that was acceptable. I said it was acceptable. I paid first and last. I do not have money to lose. I am a library assistant. I make enough to live on in a city that is trying its best to make that impossible. And the deposit and last month's rent represented most of what I had set aside. I signed the lease. I moved in with my boxes and my organizational habits and my sense that I had made a reasonable decision under pressure. The apartment is 1 bedroom, 4th floor, interior courtyard facing. The bedroom has a window that looks out over the courtyard, which is a small concrete square with 2 benches no one uses and a tree that is doing its best. The kitchen and living room face the street. The whole place runs to about 600 square feet and smells slightly of paint, the new kind on top of old, the way rentals do. I spent the first week learning it the way you learn any new place, which floorboards flex underfoot, where the cold spots are, how long the hot water takes to arrive in the shower, which direction the afternoon light travels. The kitchen faucet had a drip that fixed itself after the first week. The building makes a sound around 2 in the morning that I still have not fully cataloged, somewhere between a settling and a mechanical hum, the kind of building noise that is perfectly ordinary and is somehow loudest at exactly the time you most need to sleep. My first conversation with the building manager was to sign the lease. He met me in the small management office off the lobby, which is the size of a large closet and smells of carpet and old paper. His name is Gerald Fenwick. He is in his late 50s with gray at his temples and a manner that I initially read as professional and later came to read as rehearsed. He gave me the keys and the parking information and the recycling schedule and the number to call for maintenance requests. He told me there was a laundry room in the basement. He told me the elevator was old but reliable. He told me about the previous tenant, the good tenant, the quiet one, the job opportunity, when I handed him the stack of mail I had found in my box that was addressed to someone else. That was week 1. The mail was ordinary, a catalog, a magazine renewal notice, a piece that looked like a bank statement. I handed it over. He said he would try to reach her, but probably it would just sit. He seemed mildly unbothered by the whole thing. I went upstairs and made dinner. The second conversation was a dripping faucet in the bathroom. Week 2. He came up and looked at it and tightened something under the sink and said it should be fine. On the way out, he paused in the hallway and looked at the bedroom doorway and said, "Is the room working out?" I said, "Yes, it's a good room." He nodded and said the previous tenant spent a lot of time in there, liked it for reading. I filed that as a friendly thing to say, and told him I did too. He left. I did not register it as odd at the time. I am registering it now. The window bothered me before I knew why it bothered me. From the bedroom, if you stand near the window, you look out over the courtyard to the opposite building. The building is set close enough to see into the lit rooms opposite without trying, the way it is in any city building where the architects prioritized footprint over privacy. Most of the windows across the courtyard were screened or curtained in a way that made the view feel neutral. But one apartment, 3rd floor, corner unit, the angle I could not quite calculate away from, had what I could only describe as a clear and direct sightline to where I was standing. Not suggestive, just architectural, just the geometry of 2 buildings placed a certain distance apart. I bought heavier curtains at the end of week 2. Gray linen, good weight, the kind that fall straight and block the light properly. I told myself it was about sleeping better. I hung them on a Saturday morning and felt better immediately and went about my day. The shelf insert, I pulled out on a Thursday evening in week 3 because I had finally gotten to the bedroom closet in my ongoing campaign to clean this apartment into something that felt like mine rather than someone else's. I am thorough is the thing. I clean places people do not clean. I was raised with the understanding that the backs of shelves and the bottoms of drawers are not someone else's problem. They are your problem the moment you move in. I pulled the insert out. I found the notebook. I read the last entry standing in the closet. And then I sat on the bed and I thought, for a long time, about the job opportunity. Here is what I knew by the end of that evening. The notebook covered 14 months of someone's life in this apartment. The first 8 months were the diary of a person who was doing fine. A person with a job she cared about, a friend called Danny, a neighborhood she was learning to like, small preferences she was getting to satisfy. Then something shifted. Not at once. Gradually, and then noticeably, and then inescapably. A man. Not named. Never named. Not once in the last 6 months of entries. Not once in 14 months of a life written down, which is a specific choice when you think about it. He is just he. He appears first as a neighbor, a background presence, someone she passes in the lobby and is faintly aware of. Then he appears more often. Then she is thinking about when he will appear. Then she is managing the thought of when he will appear. Then the managing is its own subject. She writes, around the 4-month mark before the end, I looked it up today. The window in the courtyard, the apartment directly across. I found the name on the building directory. I'm not going to write it here. She found the name. She chose not to write it. She was already afraid, 4 months before the end. Afraid enough to not put his name in her private notebook. I closed the notebook that night. I put it on the nightstand. I looked at the closet, at the shelf insert still leaning against the wall where I had put it, and I thought, I am not going to put that back tonight. I have not put it back since. The next morning, I went to the coffee shop that was 2 blocks from the apartment. I had walked past it in my first week and noted it vaguely. A decent-looking place, the kind with exposed brick and plants in the window. Nothing special. I went in and ordered a latte with oat milk and sat down with the notebook and opened it to the beginning. I did not realize until I was halfway through, until I hit the entry where Maya writes, with an enthusiasm that feels entirely genuine, found the best coffee shop literally 2 blocks away. They do the oat milk correctly, which is apparently hard to do. I am going to become a regular. That I had ordered what she ordered and come to where she came. I had found her coffee shop before I knew it was hers. The oat milk was correct. She had not been wrong about that. I sat with this for a moment. Then I kept reading. I read the notebook across 2 evenings in that coffee shop. The first evening, I got through the early months. The ordinary good life of a person in a new apartment. The friendship with Danny. The work promotion she was proud of. The particular quality of light in the bedroom in the afternoon that she loved and wrote about twice. The second evening, I read the last 6 months. By the time I closed the notebook at the end of the second evening, the coffee shop was nearly empty, and the staff were wiping down the counter, and I sat with my cold cup for a while and looked at nothing. She never names him, not once. I had spent 2 evenings reading, looking for it, some slip, some moment where she forgets to be careful and the name comes through. It does not come. What I have instead is the 3rd floor. That appears once, in an entry from approximately 3 months before the last one. The man from the 3rd floor. He was in the lobby again when I came home. He always looks at me like he's counting something. The 3rd floor. That is what I have. I went back to the apartment. I went to the lobby. I looked at the building directory, a printed sheet in a plastic frame, last updated according to the bottom in a year that predated my lease, listing tenants by floor and unit number. 3rd floor, 3A, empty. 3B, R. Hollis. 3C, D. Kraus. D. Kraus. I went back upstairs. I opened the notebook to the entry about the 3rd floor. I put my phone beside it, the screen showing the directory photo I had taken in the lobby. The man from the 3rd floor. D. Kraus, 3C. I did not know if this was the same person. I could not know. One reference, no name, a floor number. It was not evidence of anything. It was just a coincidence that felt like something pressing lightly on the back of my neck. My hands were doing the thing hands do when you are trying not to acknowledge what you are thinking. I put the notebook down. I made tea I did not drink. I looked at the window with the heavy gray curtains. Maya found the name on the building directory. She chose not to write it in her notebook. She looked up the apartment directly across the courtyard, and she found the name, and she did not write it. Maya hung something in front of her window too, probably. There are holes in the wall where curtain hardware used to be, spaced the same as mine. I filled them when I hung my curtains without thinking twice. She was 4 months from the last entry when she made that choice. 4 months of whatever happened in those 4 months. And she never wrote the name. I had found the name. I had been trying to decide for a week whether finding it meant I was getting closer to something or closer to the same situation Maya was in when she stopped writing it down. That is the specific thought I was having at 2 in the morning with my cold tea and my notebook and my heavy curtains and the building making its settling sound in the dark. I did not sleep particularly well that week. The conversation with the building manager happened at the end of week 4. I had been thinking about it for several days. How to have it without having it. How to ask a question that got me somewhere without telling him what I was actually trying to understand. I am a librarian's assistant. My entire professional life is about understanding what someone actually needs when they ask a question, and about how to find information carefully and without disturbing the system you are searching. I applied this to the problem. I went to the management office on a Tuesday afternoon. Gerald Fenwick was at his desk doing something with papers, the kind of paper handling that looks like organization but might just be movement. I knocked on the open door. He looked up. I said I was sorry to bother him. I said I had been collecting mail for the previous tenant, still arriving even now, and I wondered if there was a forwarding address I could use to redirect it rather than leaving it to accumulate. Just trying to be helpful, I said. He said there was no forwarding address. She left quickly. He said this in the same tone he used the first time. Completely normal, a statement of fact, nothing weighted. I said that was a shame. I said the mail was starting to feel like clutter, and I did not like throwing away someone else's correspondence. He nodded. I said, "Does she know anyone in the building still? Anyone I could pass it to?" He said she had not really socialized with other tenants much. He said this carefully. I said, "That is interesting, because I thought someone mentioned they were friendly with her." He said, "Who mentioned that?" There it was. That particular sharpening. Not aggressive, careful. He asked it with a smile still on his face, but the smile was now load-bearing, doing work. I said I did not remember exactly, someone in the elevator. He said he wouldn't know about that. He didn't know about tenant relationships, really. People kept to themselves. I thanked him. I said I would just hold the mail a while longer. He said that was fine. I went back upstairs. I went over the conversation 3 times on the ride up. The sharpening when I said someone mentioned being friendly with her. The question, who mentioned that? I had not said someone mentioned it. I had said I thought someone mentioned it. He went straight to, who? The answer to, who said your tenant had a friend in the building, is not a question a building manager needs to ask unless the answer matters to him. He relaxed when I said I didn't remember, visibly. The smile went back to easy. Why would he need to know which tenant had mentioned being friendly with Maya? What explanation exists for that specific reaction that leads somewhere ordinary? I sat with this for 3 days. I went back and forth. I am not someone who sees patterns where there are none. I am someone who organizes information for a living, and one of the first things you learn doing that is the difference between a signal and noise. What I had was a building manager who reacted to the word friendly with the specific attention of someone who had a reason to care about it, and who relaxed when I told him I could not identify the source. That could be nothing. Landlords have complicated relationships with tenants. There are 100 reasons a building manager might care about tenant social dynamics. I know this. But Maya had been a good tenant, quiet, no trouble. Left for a job opportunity with no forwarding address. And a man on the 3rd floor had been in every entry of the last 6 months of her notebook with a specific quality of looking that she described as counting something. On day 32, I looked up her name. I had been avoiding it. I knew I was avoiding it. Every day I thought, I should check. Every day I did not. Checking meant confirming. As long as I did not check, the notebook was still just a notebook left behind by someone who moved quickly and forgot it. And I was a person who had found it and gotten too invested in a stranger's private thoughts. On day 32, I sat in my living room with my laptop and I searched Maya Ostrova missing, because I had her last name. That is the one thing I did not tell you yet. It was on the bank statement in the accumulated mail pile, the one I handed to the building manager in week 1, and then he handed back in week 2, saying he couldn't reach her to forward it. I put it with the rest. I had not opened it. But the name was visible through the envelope window. Maya Ostrova. I had had her last name for weeks and had not searched it. I was not searching it on purpose. Maya Ostrova. Reported missing by a contact named Daniela Marchetti. Filed 6 weeks after Maya gave notice on this apartment. Daniela, Danny, had assumed she had moved. When weeks passed with no contact, Danny had called the number she had, which went unanswered. And then she had called Maya's workplace, where they told her Maya had given 2 weeks' notice and left. And then Danny had filed the report. The contact information on the report listed a best friend since college. It listed the last known address as this apartment. The case was open. Maya had not been found. I sat in the living room looking at the screen for a while. Then I closed the laptop. Then I opened it again. Then I pushed it away from me on the table and stood up and went to the kitchen window and looked at the street. She was gone. Not moved. Gone. The job opportunity was not a job opportunity, or if it was, no one had heard from her since. I was living in her apartment. D. Krause was in 3C. Gerald Fenwick had tightened a faucet in my bathroom and said the previous tenant spent a lot of time in the bedroom, liked it for reading, said it as if he knew her habits specifically. And Maya's last entry ended with a dragged pen line, and 3 days later she was gone and no one had found her. I did the calculation I had been avoiding since week 3. 12-month lease. First and last month paid. Deposit. Money I did not have to lose, at a moment when I had no immediate alternative and could not produce first month elsewhere on short notice. I had been doing this calculation in the back of my mind every time I thought about the notebook and the window and the name on the directory. Every time I talked myself into staying, the calculation was part of the reason. But there is a level of information at which the calculation changes. I had hit that level. I was not yet certain I was in danger. I want to be clear about this because I do not want to over-dramatize what I was thinking in that moment. I had a notebook. I had a missing persons report. I had a building manager who reacted oddly to one word in one conversation. I had an apartment number on a building directory and a reference to a floor number in a diary entry. I did not have a direct connection. I did not have evidence of anything. I was a 29-year-old library assistant who had found a notebook and done a search and was now sitting in her kitchen at 9:30 at night trying to understand what she was actually inside. But Maya had not been wrong about the window. She had not been wrong about the name she chose not to write. She had been afraid enough in her private notebook to not write a name, and she was gone. I am the kind of person who finishes things. I have been this way since I was a child. Books, projects, arguments, cleaning the backs of closet shelves. I do not put things down half done. I started reading the notebook before I understood what it was. I was going to follow it to where it ended. But I was going to do it from outside this apartment. I called my friend Petra. I said, "Can I come over?" She said, "Of course. Are you okay?" I said, "I'll explain when I get there." I put the notebook in my bag. I took my laptop. I took my toothbrush and 2 days of clothes. I locked the apartment and I went. At Petra's kitchen table that night, I told her the whole thing. She is a good listener, Petra. She works in social work. She has a professional capacity for sitting with difficult information without reacting before she has understood all of it. She let me go all the way through. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You need to take this to the police." "I know," I said. "Tomorrow," she said. "I know," I said. She made me tea. We talked about what I would say and in what order. She is methodical too, in a different way than I am. She thinks about how information lands, how to present a thing so it is received rather than dismissed. We worked it out together at the kitchen table. By midnight, we had a plan. I did not sleep at Petra's kitchen table, obviously. I slept in her spare room. But I slept badly, and what I kept coming back to was not the missing persons report, and not D. Krause, and not the pen dragging across the page. What I kept coming back to was the entry about the good week. 8 months before the last entry. Maya got a promotion at work. She went to a concert with Danny. She found the coffee shop 2 blocks away, and the oat milk was correct. She wrote 2 paragraphs about the coffee shop, about the quality of the light in there in the late afternoon, about the table she had decided was her table, about the particular warmth of finding a place in a new neighborhood that feels like it was waiting for you. She was happy in those 2 paragraphs. Not exuberantly happy, just the ordinary, sustainable happiness of a person who is settled somewhere and has good things happening and wants to write them down because they are worth preserving. I had sat in that coffee shop and read those paragraphs and ordered her order and felt, for a moment, the specific pleasure of a stranger's good week. And I had filed her as a person like me, someone who had lived in this apartment before me and was fine, and would continue to be fine somewhere else. She was not fine somewhere else. She was nowhere. She was a missing persons report filed by Danny, who had thought she moved. She was an open case. She was the person whose pen had dragged across a page. I held those 2 things against each other in the dark of Petra's spare room. The good week entry and the last entry. The coffee shop and the dragged line. The person who was careful about writing a name and the person who at some point between the dragged line and the Friday notice had done what? Left? Been made to leave? Something else? 3 days. The pen dragged on a Tuesday. The notice was given on a Friday. 3 days that the notebook does not cover, that I have no access to, that exist only in whatever happened between a woman who was afraid and a building manager who described her leaving as ordinary. I did not know what happened in those 3 days. I still do not. That is the part I cannot close. On day 4 of staying at Petra's, I went back to the apartment to collect more of my things. I timed it for the middle of the afternoon on the assumption that this was when the lobby would be quiet. The elevator was at the lobby when I arrived. The doors were opening. A man stepped out. He was in his 40s. Pleasant face, the kind of face that is easy to forget individually because all of its components are regular. He was carrying a bundle of mail, and he looked up from it when I stepped into the lobby, and he smiled. He said hi. He said he thought he recognized me as the new tenant on 4. He said his name was Daniel Kraus. He was in 3C, he said, if I ever needed anything. He asked if I was settling in okay. I said yes. I said it was a great apartment. I was getting to like the neighborhood. I said it was nice to meet him. He said the same. He said the previous tenant had also been a great addition to the floor. He said this with a kind of warm sincerity that would have landed as a genuine compliment if I did not already know, or think I knew, or have reason to suspect, what I thought I knew. He said, I hope you are as happy here as she was. As she was. Not as happy as she became, or as happy as she ended up. As she was. Present tense made past. I said I hope so too. I smiled. He went to the elevator. I waited for the doors to close. Then I stood in the lobby for about 30 seconds, doing nothing. There is a specific quality to the experience of knowing something you cannot yet use. I had spent 4 days at Petra's table, going over everything I knew and trying to determine what, if anything, it added up to. And I had arrived at enough to bring to someone, not enough to say. A notebook, a missing persons report, a conversation with the building manager, an apartment number. I did not have a connection. I had a directional arrow, and I did not know where it ended. But I had just had a 90-second conversation with Daniel Kraus in 3C in which he expressed warm regard for the woman who lived in my apartment before me and the woman whose last notebook entry ended with a dragged pen line. And I had smiled and said it was nice to meet him. And I had meant none of it. And he had. I did not know what he had meant. I did not know what was behind the smile. I did not know if he knew what I was carrying, or if I was standing in the lobby of a building with a perfectly ordinary neighbor who had simply lived here long enough to notice who came and went. I went upstairs. I collected what I had come for. I left. The detective was a woman named Rosa Ferreira. She was assigned to Maya's missing persons case, and I found her name through the case documentation I had pulled online, the public-facing reference number, and the precinct designation. I went to the precinct on a Wednesday morning in person. I had thought carefully about this. I did not want a phone record attached to this conversation if I could avoid it. I did not fully know why I did not want that, only that Maya had chosen not to write a name in a private notebook and had still ended up where she ended up. I was being careful in ways I could not fully justify, and I decided to trust that instinct. I brought the notebook in a sealed plastic freezer bag. I had handled it already. I knew that I could not undo it, but I had bagged it properly before I left the apartment for the last time. I brought my own written account, typed up on Petra's laptop and printed at the library where I work. The window and the curtain hardware holes, the building directory and the angle I had calculated, the landlord conversation and the specific sharpening when I said the word friendly, D. Krause in the lobby, and what he said about the previous tenant. I brought the missing persons case number I had found online. I sat in a waiting area for 40 minutes. Then, Rosa Ferreira came out and took me to a room with a table and 2 chairs and a window that looked into a hallway, and she sat down across from me and said, "Tell me everything, in order." So I did. She listened the way good detectives listen, which is differently from how most people listen. She did not react, did not nod reassuringly, did not signal whether what I was saying was useful or not. She just tracked it. She asked specific questions at the end. She asked me to describe the lobby conversation with the building manager in as much detail as I could. She asked me to describe the physical condition of the notebook, the pen drag, the pages after it, whether anything appeared to have been removed. She asked when I had first found it and when I had first searched the missing persons database, and she noted the gap between those 2 dates without commenting on it. I noted her noting it. She took the notebook in its freezer bag and signed a form and gave me a copy. She took my written account. She told me she could not share information about the investigation with me, that if there were developments, she would be in contact, and that she strongly recommended I not return to the apartment alone or without notifying her office first. I said I was breaking the lease. She said that was probably sensible. She did not say it in a way that told me anything concrete. She was careful too. At the door she paused. She said, "You did the right thing coming in." She said it professionally, but she said it. I broke the lease that week. I accepted the financial loss, the deposit, the last month, gone, money I had paid out of an account that did not have much room for it. I found a room in a shared house 3 neighborhoods east, small, with 2 roommates I did not know yet, in a building that smelled of cooking and had no courtyard. I moved in on a Saturday with my boxes. I did not give the new address to Gerald Fenwick, or to anyone whose name I associated with the previous building. On the Sunday I found Danny. Maya's Instagram was still active, not updated since the year she disappeared. The last post was a photo of a coffee shop interior, a specific quality of late afternoon light, a table in the corner that was clearly her table. But the account was there, and in the comments on that post, from months after it was uploaded, Danny had written, "Miss you." 2 words. No context. The kind of comment you leave on a dormant account because you do not know where else to put the thought. Her profile was public. Her contact information included a message link. I wrote, "My name is Nora. I lived in Maya's apartment for 5 weeks. I found something she left behind. The police have it now. I wanted you to know that someone was looking." I sent it. I put my phone face down on the mattress of my new room in the shared house, and I went to make tea. When I came back, there was a reply. It had been 11 minutes. "Thank you." That was it. 2 words, the same as the comment. I sat with them for a while. The investigation is still open. I know this because Rosa Ferreira called me once, 3 weeks after our meeting, to ask one follow-up question about the lobby conversation. Specifically whether the building manager had asked me which unit I was in when I mentioned the mail. He had not, I said. She thanked me and said she might be in touch again. She has not been in touch again. I do not know what that means. I think about Danny posting on that dormant account, "Miss you," into the silence of an Instagram page that hasn't moved in more than a year, leaving a comment that Maya will never read but that had to go somewhere. I think about the specific loneliness of that. I think about the coffee shop. I went back once, a month after I moved out, because I was in the neighborhood for an errand and I walked past it. I did not go in. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at it for a moment, the plants in the window, the quality of the light at that time of day, the table visible in the corner that was probably her table. Then I kept walking. The notebook is in an evidence bag somewhere in a police precinct. It belongs to Maya. It was always Maya's. I had it for 3 weeks and I read it 4 times, and I gave it over and I did not ask for it back. The last thing she wrote, the last complete thing before the pen dragged, was, "I'm going to," and then nothing. I do not know how that sentence ends. I think about it every day.